All right, what's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, all four sides of us as a whole. I will talk about each of the four sides. We'll talk about where clothing sits, and then I'll get into what this video is about. I'll address the noise surrounding because there's construction going on right here. And I chose this location, but not really. I'm praying through it, figuring out what to film today, and this is where we are for this video. So today is the 28th of April, 2025. This is the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, one of our fourths. Our whole key phrase is keyword allowing the human body to work. We talk about the human body and we just let it do what it would do. It can only ever do what it does, designed in the image of God, Jesus the Christ. Everything within the body just has a neutral, and from there it has two directions, or however many directions, whatever part of the body does, whatever it does in. And we place clothing onto us, and it can potentially alter the human body greatly, okay? There's a center line, the sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and then the jaw, which naturally stabilizes the entire body. Those things have to stay in the center on an earth with gravity. 2 feet on either side of that center line, there's one of them. Opposing it, gripping arches inward to keep us vertical. And so we discuss how to let that happen. Choking up. Just trying to make sure that I say all that I need to. Eating, standing, walking, sleeping, sitting, hydration, all the things that we do physically as a human being, we discuss them and how to do them naturally, the only way the body ever could, okay? Yeah, we have another fourth of us in the Image Clothing Company podcast with discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. Oh, you know what? I'm going to grab this because I like to hold this. I found this here and I've filmed quite a few videos here the past couple days, and I've been holding this, and that's great. Yes, the truth of all things is the gospel of Jesus Christ. We don't talk about opinions or religions or whatever, meaning truth is truth. We talk about things as they are. I get blunt and bold and raw and real over there. Check that out if you'd like to. Another fourth of us in the Image Clothing Company music. I address sizings and setups of guitars, which sometimes are very much altering the human body, just to allow no alteration to the hands that we're using to play the guitars, because our hands are essentially the shoulders. Hold on. As the feet are essentially the hips. The human body just has to work as a whole because it's all one. Everywhere any of it goes, all of it does. It just works together in its entirety. And there we go, okay? Another fourth of us is in the Image Clothing Company dogs, where we let dogs stay natural. That's the focus, that's the goal, that's the slogan for that side of the company. In modern days, similar to human being clothing, there's a lot of unnatural materials in dog accessories like toys, dehydrated dog food called kibble, it's very unnatural. Imbalances weight-wise in collars, leashes, harnesses, and all the things that go into those things we address. We will have collars and leashes available under In the Image Clothing Company for dogs, as we will have In the Image Clothing Company clothing available for humans. Staying centered, fitting correct, made out of 100% natural materials is how we allow the human body to work. Similar things and the same intention under what we will have available for dogs, okay? So, clothing for everybody, man, woman, tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, or any time period to ever be. It has to sit in the same location to allow the body to do the only things that it ever could. Pants need to be entirely above the hips, so there's no restriction to the functionality of the pelvis, and slightly higher in the front than the rear for the waistband angle, because our core muscles, as every muscle in the entire body, can only work by shortening. Okay, there's a video under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company here titled Muscles Only Contract, and that's the case. The tops that we wear have seams on top of our shoulders that need to sit evenly behind our shoulders, and that's the only location that our shoulders will ever work in, behind our head. The edges of the shoulder seams should be right where the functionality of the shoulder joint is. This button up, and I address this often, I have at least, when I've worn this one, it's slightly wider at the shoulders on me personally than ideal. But I do love this button up, and for this video, it'll actually be a good demonstration, and we'll get into it. So, 2 prerequisites we have under In The Image Clothing Company. Conditional, because there's not always laces in our shoes, which are just ropes placed into what we've made called shoes, right? And there's not always tags in clothing, but there's only one way to weave a rope across the top of the human foot, call it a shoelace, and not alter the mechanics of the human foot. That is In The Image Clothing Company's shoelacing technique, found wherever you find us, 5 words as a whole, In The Image Clothing Company. With that, we tie our shoes evenly on both feet over toward the center line of the human being, because there is one. Otherwise, potential rotation issues traveling to the tip of your head and the tips of your fingers from a rope on your feet/ankles. Secondly, we remove all tags from clothing. Anywhere a tag is placed within clothing, it's either causing a physical gap, not allowing the skeletal system to have its only operations, and or not allowing musculature to activate. And then you've got damage, things trying to compensate, and something that only can ever work all as one can't compensate without major problems. So included within the shoes when it comes to tags being removed, okay? So this video here on the main side of In The Image Clothing Company is titled Tops Are Like a Cage for the Shoulders, because that's what we need to see when it comes to visually looking at the way that tops need to fit. Here's the thing, I never understood what it meant for clothing to fit until I understood it and then founded In The Image Clothing Company and all 4 sides of what it now is. I used to wear oversized clothing for years, and it was damaging my body greatly. That is what is causing me to have to get out of all these patternings. Also worded, the patternings that I'm getting out of were caused by oversized clothing. Also uneven shoelaces, dreaded collar seams, drawstrings tied uneven, all the things we talk about under In The Image Clothing Company, right? I'll reference some videos while I'm speaking on this. In The Image Clothing Company's official shoelace technique, under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, I understand the wind noise. How drawstrings affect body mechanics, under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company. Why oversized clothing is common, under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company. I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna keep going with it. I've been battling this, man. Things have caused me to put forth a little bit more effort today in the past couple days to be able to actually accomplish, because they're things that are huge and need to be done. So, do you see what I'm talking about? Yeah, this kind of stuff has not happened as much as it has. Flip, dude, in the past couple days when it comes to me filming In The Image Clothing Company content. So, yeah, meaning I'm supposed to be doing all this and I have to push through it. Warfare, as we talk about in the Image Clothing Company podcast. Check it out, the truth of all things. So it's like a cage for our shoulders when we wear tops, meaning it should sit in a location where it will just be caging our shoulders. One big thing that happens though is if clothing has stretch within it, which how stretchy clothing affects body mechanics under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company. Okay, also the dreaded collar seam under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, I will reference right now, and we'll talk about it more here as I do. But stretch within clothing won't allow clothing to have a shape to it. The clothing will just slip and fall away and stretch and form in really strangely unnatural ways because it's made out of unnatural materials. That's pretty well the only way you could ever have stretch within something we could call clothing, is by man-made artificial things being woven together to call something that's fake clothing. And it's not clothing. It tries to get passed off as it. And I wore it for decades. So much damage happens to the body. So tops are like a cage for the shoulders because there should be this natural fitting frame to our natural shoulder frame, okay? There's a neutral collarbone angle, and that allows the arms to be neutral here, straight out from the pinky. If the collarbones drop, the neutral wrist is gone, okay? There's a video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company here titled The Natural Collarbone Angle. I also did a video today under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company here titled The Right Collarbone, because it's the one that gets affected so much, the right side of the body as a whole, living in the right-handed world. A video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company here is titled The Right-Handed World. So tops are like a cage because there should be this nice uniform shape that will just nicely quote-unquote cage the shoulders and just encapsulate the body without allowing slippage like this, right? Or slippage like this. So what we can focus on is when we're trying to see if clothing fits correct, look at the center line of the human being. Look at the sternum here or the spine, but you're not going to be seeing where the spine is like directly if you're looking from the front of the human being. The trachea, the nose, the center line, right? As we talk about, it is there, it has to be. There's no belief or opinion, or I used to say no yoga class, right? No, there's just a mechanical machine placed on a rock in space, AKA the human being placed onto Earth. So we need to look at the center line, and from there we can measure out. On the right to the edge seam of our shoulder, and from there we can measure, there meaning the center line, we can measure out to the left to the edge seam of the left shoulder, okay? From the center line to the right and from the center line to the left, if that distance is the same, then your clothing's centered. And there you go. And now you have this quote-unquote cage. I picture like a rope from the top of the collar on the center and the rear, and it's just like this, hanging the clothing, the top off of us, and it just lowers the rope or the chain down and drops it onto our shoulders, and it just cages our shoulders just very nicely, evenly from side to side from our center line, okay? That's what I mean when I say tops are like cages for the shoulders, because what can happen is your shirt can actually fit you quite well at the edges of your shoulders, as far as there's no distance or play between the seam and your shoulder edge, but your body itself can be in such an imbalance to where the distance between your left shoulder and your center line is smaller than the distance, that word was distance, between your center line and your right shoulder. And so your clothing can actually be actually balanced. And I say it like that because that's so very rare nowadays in clothing design, but it could be the case, and your body could still be imbalanced. And here's one thing that allows that, not in a good way, but does allow that to happen: the dreaded collar seam, as we talk about. Within t-shirts, that seam in the collar of the shirt, or anything, keeping collars centered. A video under the main site here of In The Image Clothing Company. If the collar isn't centered around our neck, which has to stay centered because two of the things that we address as the center line of the human being are in the neck, the trachea and the cervical spine, meaning the part of the spine that is the neck. A collar that's imbalanced will cause your body to be, even if the size of the clothing fits right at the very edges of your shoulders, because you'll be like this. And so your collar could be off-centered, but your shoulder seams could be right at the very edges of both of your shoulders. So, yes, it needs to be like a cage for the shoulders. And in the center of that needs to be seen as well. The collar needs to be evenly around our neck. Really, it's just like a cage for the whole top of the body. So the dreaded collar seam modification under In The Image Clothing Company, otherwise your collar will just be uncentered undoubtedly. And the sizing of your top, like I'm saying, I'll give myself as an example. I wear size medium in men's for tops. And if I were to have a size medium shirt that fits well at my shoulders, but it has stretch within it because it's made out of unnatural materials, what can happen is while I'm using my body through this earthly life, placing an item of clothing on me with stretch in it, the rear of my body, if we take from the center of our body, being the spine and the rear, and measure from that over to the edge of the right shoulder seam, but on our back, that distance can be wider than from the spine to the left shoulder seam on the back, because stretching has happened to the clothing itself. And so when I say tops are like cages for the shoulders, it needs to be uniform. It needs to be the same measurement from the center in the front to the center of the front right shoulder seam, and in the center in the front to the center of the left front shoulder seam, the center in the rear on the spine over to the center of the right rear shoulder seam, and from the center in the front in the rear to the left rear shoulder seam. And then it's just like a cage, just nicely sitting on you, and then your body can move. Because there's a video here on the main side of In The Image Clothing Company titled, it might not be exactly this, but people don't move through life, they move through clothing. Something similar to that. People move through their clothing. It's like you're swimming through what's always on you, trying to get to what is around you when your clothing isn't allowing your body to work. So tops are like a cage for the shoulders, okay? Meaning that's how it should feel. Everything you ever do, it's like I can sit here and I can move my right arm and it doesn't affect the rest of my clothing. And I can sit here and I can move my left arm and it doesn't affect the rest of my clothing as far as the top. And it shouldn't affect anything else either going throughout the entire body. But that's what I mean when I say tops are like cages for the shoulders. It should be something that can just sit there and the motion happens at the edges of the cage. At the edges of this shoulder seam is where the motion's happening, and at the edges of this shoulder is where the motion's happening, depending on which arm I'm using, and the rest of the cage can stay just in its location. And that way your body can stay evenly distant from its center line, from the very farthest right at the edge of your arm and the very farthest left at the other edge of the body on that side's arm. So there you go. That's the way we need to be able to see it. Otherwise, your clothing can fit you, quote unquote, correct, size-wise, but it won't be centered and it won't be allowing your body to be. Yes, so there's a video under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company here titled Check Your Clothing's Seams. I talk about often in the armpit seams that come down to the sleeves. Sometimes they'll stitch those and then pin them flat one direction, and the opposite side sometimes they'll go the opposite direction. And then you've got rotations happening, and now you don't have a cage, you have a twisted thing on you that's rotating your whole body. And even if they're stitched the same direction, they're still either pulling you forward into external rotation or backward into excessive internal rotation from those armpit seams, and possibly the side seams as well that come down. And I say often we shouldn't have side seams in our clothing that's against our bodies. In button-ups, often it's stitched nicely in like this, flat, and so that's okay, but against the actual skin of the human being, it will alter your breathing. There's a video here under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company titled How Clothing Affects the Rib Cage. So, yes, a cage, okay, is what tops are for the shoulders. So, there you go, okay. Keeping tops waisted, another video under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company here. Tops need to be right where the hips will hinge, okay? So, In The Image Clothing Company clothing, we will have all this and everything that we ever talk about behind the intentions of our designs for every item of clothing we would ever put out. Same with dog, quote unquote, clothing as well, right? So, Okay, thank you. The 28th of April, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of all four sides of In The Image Clothing Company. Check out In The Image Clothing Company dogs. I will personally be breeding purebred standard poodles. You could potentially end up with a puppy from one of our litters if that's what you would like. There's definitely conditions as to who the puppies will be going to. Check out the video under In The Image Clothing Company dogs titled When the Standard Poodle Puppies Come to know some of what that would look like as far as the conditions. And thank you. In The Image Clothing Company podcast, we're on episode 113, so we've got some good stuff going over there. It's been good since the start, if I'm self-proclaiming that. So thank you. They're doing some soccer drills here. They're actually like just getting started. They were here when I showed up for this video, but I'm done anyway as far as the context for this here. Okay, so 100% natural materials is really the only way we're going to allow a cage type feel to encapsulate the shoulders without altering them with the tops that we wear. So thank you.